Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, welcome to my page. Thank you for watching today. My name is Dr. Margaret Gani and I am a consultant psychiatrist and a public health professional. And this channel is dedicated to preventative mental health. I live and work in the UK and you can call me Dr. Maggie. Thank you to all those that have subscribed and liked my initial welcome video, and please go on to do so and to share it with others. Now, today we're going to be talking about our mental health, right? We all struggle. You never know what's going to happen. Life is unpredictable. You wake up and it could be traffic, it could be your health, it could be work, family. There's so much going on. Yes, there are good things that happen in life, but there are things that can be triggers for a little bit of a wobble in our mental health. So, what do we do about it? Now, there are various options. Obviously, having people you can count on, family and friends, is very important. But what else can we do? Let's take a pause to just think, what is going on today? It's Friday, it's the end of the week, the start of the weekend, which can be a very positive thing for some people, but maybe not so much if you're working this weekend. But let's just take a pause. Okay, now we'll go on from there. What I'll be talking about today is something called talking therapy. Now, talking therapy are psychological interventions that are delivered by licensed therapists when you struggle with different mental conditions, typically, right? They might be, you might have been offered if you were struggling with anxiety or depression or something similar, and there are various types of talking therapy. The first thing I'll say is that while I'm a big believer in the talking therapies, they are not necessarily the solution for every problem. Number one, always remember that. However, they can be really useful. Number two, there are different kinds of talking therapy. We call them different modalities. And so it is important to talk with your mental health care provider, your therapist, or whoever might refer you for talking therapies or assess you. Make sure that the talking therapy type that you are being recommended or you're about to start is appropriate for what you're going through, right? Because there are different types. Another point, we are not always ready for talking therapy. So you might be struggling with your mental health, but it might not be the appropriate time for you to start talking therapy. Why? Because you might not have developed what we in the field might call sufficient psychological mindedness, and that's just a long-winded way of saying sometimes your mind needs to be in a certain place and you might need to be aware of certain things to be able to benefit maximally from talking therapy. Okay? Another thing that is important to think about is, do you get along enough with a therapist, right? Is there a vibe that works? Because talking therapy involves weekly, it depends, the frequency can vary, but many times it will be weekly sessions with the same individual for a number of months. There are short-term types of talking therapy, there are longer-term types. But whatever happens, you're going to be talking to this person about personal details of your life for quite a while. And so you need to make sure that you get along with the person to a certain degree. Because if you don't feel comfortable enough with the person, then maybe the person is not the right therapist for you. And you will find that many times when you are offered therapy or you are deciding to go to therapy, there is an initial free consultation. At least I can say for sure about the way it's done in the UK. I'm not, I can't say for certain about the way it's done everywhere else. But many times in the modalities of therapy that I am aware of in the UK, there is an initial consultation. This is, of course, if you're accessing it privately. But there is an initial consultation that's free. It's usually maybe about 30 minutes or 45 minutes, where you just get to talk with the therapist and get to find out whether you get along, right? Whether you really can connect with the therapist. If you don't feel that you connect with that particular therapist, it's okay not to go on to have therapy with them. You can decide to try, seeing if you work better with another therapist, because it's important that you get along enough to benefit from the experience. Even on the NHS here in the UK, even though you're not paying for therapy, there's usually an initial session. In cognitive analytic therapy, which is the type of therapy that I tend to be involved in, we would have an initial meeting where you get to know the logistics of the therapy you're accessing, things about what's expected, how you would engage, but also just to see how you get along with the therapist and whether you're happy to work with them. So I'll stop there. I've talked about, making sure you can get along with your therapist, making sure you're at the right place, mentally to access the therapy. And I've also talked about how it's not necessary that you must have therapy at a certain point in time. You have to be ready to access it. Now, the other thing I'll talk about is something that I will introduce here, and I'll talk a little bit more about it as we go along. Now, something I like us to think about is for those of us that drive, and even if you don't drive, when you're driving down the highway, the motorway, or whatever, you have a certain destination that you're going to, right? You might be using Waze or Google or whatever map app or thing, or you might even be using a paper map if you're really old school, right? You might be using some sort of thing to guide you to where you're going. And there is a destination, right? And some of the time, right, you come off at an exit because you need to deviate for whatever reason. Maybe there's too much traffic or something is going on. Now, what I want you to do is to think about your life a little bit like driving, right? And many times we have a destination, we have where we're going. And that is similar to the patterns we tend to exhibit in our lives. Each of us have patterns, the way we act, right? If you ask my siblings, they'll tell you, oh, Margaret tends to do this, 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 this. We all have patterns. Sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're negative. Now, if you think about the patterns of the way we act, especially the less positive ones, sometimes we might call them maladaptive. If you think about the maladaptive patterns in our lives, right, we tend to go a certain way. And as we go down that route, we find ourselves repeating certain patterns of behavior that are not really helpful, right? Many times you're like, oh no, I've done it again. I know I shouldn't do that. I know it makes me upset. I know I get anxious when I do this, so I get really stressed, but I just find myself doing this over and over. However, one of the things that can help your mental health is if you start to think about life as a pathway, a motorway, a driving route where you can take exits. So you can come off those patterns. You can start to practice using exits, which is one of the terms we use in cognitive analytic therapy. You can use exits to come out of your dysfunctional patterns, right? And if you think about your dysfunctional pattern as A to D, right? Right? You wake up in the morning, you're upset. You do A, which is not particularly healthy for you. You do B, and you're like, uh-oh, I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm doing this. And you do C, and then you get to D, and then finally, at the end of the day, you're like, oh no, I've messed things up, right? Now, you can decide to exit off that harmful pathway at A, B, C, D. So you can decide to exit earlier or later. Now, what talking therapy can sometimes help you do, and what I'm hoping this video can help you start thinking about, is that it can teach you to learn, first of all, what your harmful patterns are, but secondly, to realize that you have the power, many times with support, to exit from your harmful patterns, right? And you can start to do things slightly differently. Now, the first thing that helps is to think about your harmful patterns. What are you doing? What behaviors lead to outcomes that you don't like in your everyday life, right? It will take some pausing. There's a phrase we call it stop and think. So stop and think. What harmful patterns do you have, right? What could you do differently, right? Are there times you need to say no? Are you taking on too much? Are you too perfectionist? Do you need to just settle with good enough? So think about these patterns and think about exits and highways. And in my next video, we'll continue on from here. But it's been lovely to be with you again. Please like and subscribe, right? And remember, this and other videos do not replace care from a licensed healthcare professional. So if you are struggling with your mental or physical health in any way, please make sure you contact a licensed healthcare professional in your community and get the healthcare you need. Remember, prevention saves lives, and that includes mental health prevention. Together, let's optimize our mental health. Lovely seeing you guys. Have a lovely weekend. Catch up soon. Bye.